I would like to introduce our guest that's joining Nick for this segment. It is Senator Mike Weber to give us a little overview of where the Senate Republicans are and where they're going and all the things in between. So, gentlemen, have some fun.
Right. Well, he asked you the question. We'll just go there. What are you, first of all, I want to ask you, hearing everything that Richard just said about finding common ground and working together across the aisle,
Sure.
Is that part of your goal? And do you think that we can make that part of the goal in the entire Senate and House on the GOP side?
It definitely is. I mean, and really, I guess from a minority party perspective in the Senate, we're always trying to work with the majority to try to find common ground. Obviously, a lot of times it's incumbent upon the majority party to want to work with us and work in a bipartisan fashion. And that's happened on some big issues. A lot of the budgets have been bipartisan over the last couple of years.
Selfridge was a great example yesterday.
Selfridge was a great example, but even that was, behind the scenes, if people followed it, the House passed the supplemental about 3 months ago, and we were pushing for a clean supplemental at the Senate level. We ended up passing a supplemental that we didn't really think would actually get the money to Selfridge until it was maybe too late. Luckily, cooler heads prevailed. We did find the common ground. We're able to pass a clean supplemental that was Rep. Robinson's bill from the outset, and ended up getting it passed in time for this June 1 deadline that the governor, speaker put in place. But so that's a good example of, the process wasn't always bipartisan from the whole, for the whole time, but it ended up being a bipartisan solution at the end, and that's ultimately, the right thing to do. Similar to, we had the deadline in February of 25 on tip credit, on minimum wage, paid sick leave, even though the changes made, I think still put us at a deficit with other states in terms of being a business-friendly environment, much better than like what would have gone into place if we didn't do anything at all. If we didn't, if we dug in and just said, look, we're not going to be able to find common ground there. And we did find common ground. So there's a lot of examples like that. And certainly, we're hoping to be in the majority after this next election, and it'll be then incumbent upon us to work with them to try to find common ground where we can.
As we look at some of the numbers that Richard and his team put out at the beginning of the conference, talking about literacy rates, talking about per capita growth, which is tanking, unfortunately, do you see those as some of your core principles and core issues moving forward that we have to tackle and solve?
Definitely. I mean, we can't keep, Governor Snyder was at a function a little while ago, and he said, we're really great at talking about stuff, but we're not as good at actually getting it done and doing stuff. We know what the problems are. We know what a lot of the solutions are. I mean, we can look towards our third grade reading law that was passed and now has had some modifications that are not helpful, but we can look at how that mirrored what Mississippi is doing. And again, Mississippi, the Mississippi Miracle went from, in the upper 40s for reading and literacy to a top 10 state.
Right.
But what they did was they had consistency, and they put the plan in place. They stuck with it from a policy standpoint and from a funding standpoint, and that's what we need to do.
So how do we do that then, especially in a state, as Richard said, that flip-flops on policies every 8 years?
Well, I think the key is you need to get that bipartisan buy-in when you actually do it. A lot of what we're doing right now is all the Democrats vote yes on energy policy or this and that. Now the Republicans want to repeal it. When I worked on energy policy with then Energy Chair Eric Nesbitt, who's now running for governor, we had like over 85 votes on that policy. So the policy that we put in place in 16 that Governor Snyder signed on energy, we actually had that in place until 23. And so when we're working on these big issues, we need to have bipartisan buy-in, and then there'll be more folks on both sides of the aisle that go, I remember when we negotiated that. I remember
we worked
together on that, and we've got to keep that in place for the long term, and not just say, when we get a majority, we're going to overturn that. When we get a majority, we're going to overturn that, because it's just going to go back and forth. Similar, even at the federal level, you've got, President Trump comes in, he does a bunch of executive orders. Then President Biden comes in, he undoes all those and does his own executive orders. And President Trump comes back in. It's too up and down. And when you talk to obviously not just residents, but businesses and different folks, they want consistency.
Need stability.
They want predictability.
Yeah.
They want stability. And that's what we got to get back to. The same thing with our economic development policy. It's, I think if anything, it's a great opportunity for the next governor to really work with the legislature to put a really good economic development policy together, look at what's helping and working in all these states, particularly our Midwest neighbors that are stealing our companies, stealing our jobs, and trying to, really replicate what they're doing in a lot of respects. And we know we have a lot to offer the state of Michigan. We have a great talent base here. It's a beautiful state to live in. But we got to get some of our policies right in order to become a more business-friendly environment.
So as the campaigns ramp up and things start to get really heated come November, are you concerned that the divide might grow before we get back to business in Lansing?
Well, I think, at the present moment, we've got to work on this budget. We got to get the budget done. There's, I think, a lot of motivation on both sides of the aisle to get the budget done by the end of June. To hit that July 1.
The schools really want it.
They really want it, and a lot of municipalities are also on that July 1 fiscal year as well. So I think that's critical, and I think there's a way we can work in a bipartisan fashion to do that. I don't think there's going to be a lot of other big policy things that probably will happen until after the election, and that's okay. I think, if anything, probably missed our window of opportunity last year and into like the beginning part of this year to do some of that stuff. But ultimately, that I think is okay as long as we can get this budget done and kind of get that set at least before the election really gets going.
Okay, so post-election then, what are some of the Republican priorities? You only have 8 minutes left, by the way.
All right. Well, I will tell you, just speaking for myself, I've been working a lot of mental health issues.
Okay.
And a lot of times it's been somewhat combative with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Interesting.
But it's been one where we are failing our kids in our children's psychiatric hospitals. And it kind of came on my radar even before I was sworn in 23. Hawthorne facility, December of 2022, active shooter drill, false active shooter drill.
Correct.
So did not tell the police agencies, did not tell anybody.
Nobody
knew. It was
knew.
just yes. So $13 million later in a settlement with patients, families, staff that we're paying out. So the leadership, there's been a leadership gap there. As we dove into it more, patient escapes, problems with the food, weight loss within the facility because of that, and just even exit strategies for these patients as they were leaving. We had a mom testify that, her daughter tried to commit suicide about 24 to 48 hours after she was released.
Was that Huron Valley?
No, that was our Hawthorne facility.
That was Hawthorne,
yeah.
okay.
So these are state-run facilities. The new Hawthorne Center is going to open, but later this year. But what I did was I asked for an Auditor General report. They worked on it for about a year and a half, and came up with 8 findings. 4 of them being serious findings.
Okay.
And so we have worked for the last few months, obviously not just working with the House Oversight Committee to provide some testimony and input, but also a bill package that we're going to work on in terms of trying to right this wrong and really try to get it corrected. Some of these problems have really been plaguing our state for a number of years, decades, and so it should not be a partisan issue, but I think because it's the Whitmer administration, I think people see it as like that we're attacking them and like how they're dealing with the state. It's been an issue in other governors' times as well. So we got to work on that. But ultimately,
a question on that.
Yeah, sure.
You talked about the kind of a combative or resistance when you were looking into things. Are the fixes funding? Are the fixes a change in thought process, or all of the above?
So kind of all the above. I think you need the right leadership in there, and I also think it really has to do with the transparency in the recipient rights system. And we probably don't have enough time to go through all the details, but essentially, complaints are filed about what's going on in those facilities. They're not being investigated. They're not being looked into in a timely fashion. They have cameras everywhere, but a lot of times the cameras conveniently are not working at the time of what happens. You have seen some stuff on different news channels where the footage has come out, and there was one patient that was beating another patient, and the staff kind of like egging him on and stuff like that. And there's been some accountability for that, but there's still pending litigation on stuff like that. So we need to kind of have more transparency in terms of that process of when the patient is putting the complaint in. And so that's really the crux of what our bills are trying to do. They're trying to add more transparency. We're also trying to add more patient advocate groups to the recipient rights committee. Right now we have a lot of DHHS executives on there, and we have like 3 different patient groups we've been working with, and and so we've got legislation on that. Rep. Jamie Thompson's been great working on that. Rick Outman and the Senate side has been great. Even Senator Santana across the aisle has been very welcoming to hearing these concerns and these ideas.
Yeah, going back to working across the aisle, your constituents back home, is that a conversation that they bring up, that they'd like to see you and your colleagues reach across the aisle more?
I think right now we have so many people that come up there and they're worried about the next election.
Right.
I think we need to be worried about governing. I think we know that we have serious issues we need to tackle in the state of Michigan, and how are we going to do it? And I think people see, you put the R or D next to your name when you're running for election, but after you get elected in November, they want you to get up there and govern and try to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And, my voting record speaks for itself. It's one of the most bipartisan voting records in the legislature. I put it up against anybody. But a lot of times it becomes very tribal in terms of you have to vote with the Republicans, you have to vote with the Democrats, and
sometimes it gets contentious, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It does. You get a lot of pressure on you to vote a certain way, but at the end of the day, you have to vote for your district, and you have to understand that people pay us and elect us to go up there and try to handle these big issues. And if we're just talking about it all the time and not getting anything done, that's a way to kind of get yourself unelected eventually.
Right.
So.
Okay, so you talked about mental health. What are some other priorities you'd like to start tackling?
Well, obviously, we need to become a more business-friendly state. We're really
otherwise we have big problems.
Yeah, I'm personally focused on aerospace and defense stuff. I co-chair the Aerospace and Defense Caucus. Again, the Selfridge thing was a big piece of that recently, but really trying to attract and retain not only the jobs and the companies that we have, but also the talent that we have here. I mean, we're having these kids that are leaving some of our great major universities, and they're going out to work for Boeing in Seattle when we've got the industry here. And but we feel like it's still kind of a secret, so we're trying to get that out more. And
we almost have to advertise ourselves more.
We do. And so there's a lot of issues. I think roads will continue to be an issue, but we did tackle that on a bipartisan basis, and we'll see getting that money in the locals' hands. I think is really great on the road funding piece. But yeah, I think high tide, all boats are going to float there in terms of if we can get our jobs, our economy going, I think we'll be in much better shape.
You talked about budget. Is getting it done by June feasible?
End of June? I think it is. I mean, so for the first time that anybody can remember, both the Senate and the House passed budgets before the end of April. But there's a long way to go. There's major differences between the two chambers and the governor. But I just think there's a lot of motivation. Everybody knows there's a big thing in November. Everybody's focused on.
Is there something coming up?
Yeah, there's maybe a little something coming up. I don't know. You may hear about it on your TV station in your mailbox there. So.
All righty, Senator Weber, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nick.
Always good to hear your insight.